Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome back to Non-Moving Pictures, where we examine movie posters as art. As promised, today we are returning to the Godzilla franchise to look at the poster for Godzilla vs. Megalon. I should specify though, we're not looking at the original Japanese poster. Instead, we're looking at the American poster. Because quite frankly, I find this poster to be fascinating.
Yeah, this is an image I remember quite clearly from my childhood. Not that I was alive when it was actually a movie poster, but it was also for a long time the cover for the VHS box. See, they used to have these things called video rental stores. Kind of like Redbox, but it was an entire store and it had a wider variety of stuff, not just the most recent titles. But enough nostalgia tripping. The point is that for a long time, this was the image everyone associated with Godzilla vs. Megalon. However, I highly doubt that it gets displayed much these days because, yeah.
Now you see why I put that little warning at the beginning. Look, I understand that even all these years later, it can be really hard for people to look at depictions of, Thing is though, I'm not trying to offend anyone, and I'm not one of those people who's going to go and say this poster is somehow retroactively offensive because it was made back in the 70s. There's no way they could have known. I just want to examine this as it is, and I'm sorry if this has brought up any sort of PTSD, like genuine PTSD, in anyone in the viewership. But even so, I'm gonna have to be drawing attention to this part of the poster, so again, I apologize, but I'm going to move on with it anyway.
Okay, so with that bit of awkwardness behind us, let's move on to examining the poster itself, shall we? In a word, this thing is a mess. Now, credit where credit is due, there was a lot of effort that went into making this poster at least try to look good. As I so often bring up in this series, it's very complimentary to the natural way eyes want to move about a picture. The concentric rings in the sky draw our attention towards Godzilla and Megalon. From there, our eyes travel down the sides of the towers until we land on the title. It's also a very dynamic image, packed to the brim with action. There are swooping helicopters and jets, both monsters are on the offensive. It's quite dynamic. And of course, this was made back when movie posters were still painted by hand, so you have to appreciate the amount of effort that went into it. But beyond that, wow, there's a lot to talk about in terms of how this image went wrong. First of all, there's the fact that Godzilla and Megalon are standing atop the Twin Towers in their battle for supremacy. Now, this was back in the Showa period, when the monsters were still just under 200 feet tall average, and the towers, when they stood, were over 1,030 feet tall each. However, the sizes still managed to feel off in this, and I'm not sure if it's because the kaiju are too small or the towers are too big. It's the sort of thing that just kinda scratches at my brain. But of course, having the monsters be in a cityscape at all is misleading. Not only does the movie not take place in America, certainly nowhere near New York City, but it doesn't really feature much in the way of city destruction either. Sure, Megalon does destroy a couple of cities by way of stock footage, but the actual fight which occurs takes place in a wide, open, natural landscape. And how about the monsters themselves? Godzilla's particularly interesting. This clearly isn't the version of Godzilla which appears in the movie. Line it up next to a still from the movie. You'll see the head clearly doesn't match. In fact, this head doesn't match any version of Godzilla. And his tail is so incredibly thin and short. It's like a caricature of sorts, a completely original Godzilla design conceived by the artist. I wouldn't be opposed to that if it didn't contrast so sharply with Megalon, who's drawn to look exactly the way he does in the movie. Seriously, Megalon is so accurate in this image, it's almost like he was traced. The one exception is that he has 3-toed feet instead of 2-toed feet like in the movie. And I'm not entirely sure why the extra toes were added. Also, I have to ask, Why is Megalon spitting his napalm bombs away from Godzilla? I know it looks like he's actually going for a cheap shot to Godzilla's groin, but when you line it up right, those bombs are going to sail right past the king of the monsters. Speaking of Godzilla again, even though his legs are poised like he's walking, his feet appear to be parallel with each other. Maybe it's an illusion caused by the perspective, except we don't have that same problem with Megalon's feet. So yeah, Godzilla's stance here doesn't really make sense. Getting back to Megalon, for as detailed and movie accurate as he is, I don't think the artist did a very good job defining where his arms are. Every time I look at this image, I have a hard time discerning where his right arm is coming from. I know that it's here, but the way the image is painted, it doesn't really seem like it is there. It just seems like there's texture of his body, and then suddenly there's a drill coming out of it. There's no proper shading or definition, and as a result, Megalon's body looks kind of contorted and weird. Also, this is a bit of a nitpick, but by the time this movie was made, I would have thought people would know what color Godzilla's heat ray was. You know, for all the effort that was put into making this poster, it does a heck of a lot wrong. But it's so hypnotic that I can't look away. I think we may have found the first so bad it's good movie poster in this whole series. I wasn't entirely sure it was possible, and yet, here it is. And considering that Godzilla vs. Megalon itself is also a so bad it's good Godzilla movie, well, heck, what better movie poster could you possibly hope for?
There's just no getting around it, folks. The poster for Godzilla vs. Megalon is fascinatingly bad. But at the same time, so is the movie it represents. So in a weird way, this is perfect. What a fascinating paradox for just a single image. Well, it's always fun to be returning to the Godzilla franchise, but next time I think I'll go for a poster that's a bit more otherworldly. Feel free to leave your guesses as to what it might be. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off.
Oh hey, a Spanish movie poster. This ought to be interesting. Gorgo and Superman? What the heck?